I think some things that I observe about some artists, and this is not across the board or all the time with even certain people, certain artists, just in the same way that in terms of what I've said about advice to producers or just the creative process, you can't expect just because you're in a certain studio or you've hired a certain producer or you've got songs that some like the record label has told you is great, or you co-wrote it with so and so, that it's as easy as just showing up to the studio and it just kind of happens. Something that I find that happens a little too often and is a little concerning for me at times is singers, vocalists that show up to the studio and they haven't been singing the song. They're not in vocal shape. And I mean, I know that life gets in the way, and over the course of a record, you'll get in shape because at least the way I like to approach it is that as you're working on the songs, the singer is singing the songs. I want to get vocals every opportunity I can, and so you kind of build up those muscles. But I've more often than I would like, I guess I experience that they've sung the song some. They sang the song when they made the demo, and they're listening to it more than they're actually singing it. And so they get something imprinted in their mind that is sort of an early version. And then they're not really. It's like trying to run a marathon without having prepared to run. It's like if you're not running at least a few miles every day and then maybe once a week running 9 miles, well, when it's time to run the marathon and, the gun goes off to start to the run, it's just like, well, you might start strong because you're talented, but and you have ability, but then you kind of, you run out of stamina. You run out of the ability to finish the race. You haven't really internalized the song or the performance to a point where, sometimes you get in the studio and you change the arrangement, you change the key, and in the more in command, and this doesn't just go for vocalists, it's just like everyone. And this is not necessarily so much about session musicians because they have a sort of a different, experience. I mean, if you're a session musician, you're playing on records more often, and that's more of your day to day, where you're exercising those muscles of creativity and flexibility, and you're finding out what the artist or the producer wants you to contribute as you go. But I guess that's one of my I don't know if I'd call it a pet peeve or a disappointment necessarily, but sometimes I wish it was better that in the same way that I like to prepare and be ready for a creative opportunity, I wish that that people, artists, musicians, were more prepared to come into the studio. They were more well rehearsed. They'd thought about their sounds more, or they'd sung the song a lot more. Just because when you put all that stuff under a microscope, and you try to take it through the recorded lens of microphones and capturing sound, it's usually not quite how you envisioned it in your head. And so I think that's an important thing, to be prepared, to be in shape, especially vocally. It's a muscle, and it's I have experienced often enough that you get 3 or 4 takes through vocal performance, and you've got good stuff, but you're not all the way there, and then then the voice kind of starts to go, and fatigue sets in, and then so you're suddenly at a stopping point, and you've set aside the time, and you've anticipated the moment, and you're just not able to close the deal or get to somewhere that feels like it's a complete attempt at it. I like work tapes more than I like production demos, because I think what happens with production demos, it's not that I don't like production demos, I do like them, but what happens with it, like when you make a work tape that's just like an iPhone recording of you playing the song on piano, acoustic guitar, whatever it is, and there's a vocal, there's just some sort of very simple documented performance of the song. It's way easier to go into the studio and and guide someone towards a recorded outcome, a record. A lot of times in these co-writing sessions, they're trying to make the record in their songwriting phase. And listen, I think that some amazing things have happened in those types of songwriting sessions when you have the capability to do that. Sometimes you can't beat the demo. Sometimes you can't beat the demo because you can't beat that moment of inspiration where things were happening fast. It may not be as perfect and polished as what a real record could be, and something that was a little bit more thought out and a little bit more deliberate. But inspiration and performance always trumps an accomplished sound, because an accomplished sound, that's all it is. The thing that makes us respond to records is inspiration and performance. And so the thing I'm trying to get to is this sort of demoitis, like when you have a demo that feels more like a record and demonstrates what a finished version of the song would be, and then an artist listens to it for who knows how long, a month, a year, 6 months. They get that ingrained in their mind, and that's how they relate to it. It's like getting a record from your favorite artist, and then years later or whatever, it gets the same version of it just gets remixed, and they change the balances. I mean, on one hand, that might be interesting, but it's not how you know it. You become really attached to and conditioned to what exactly that is, and that it's kind of a little bit of a frustration when you're in the studio and you're trying to make the finished record, and the artist keeps referring back to the demo. And that goes to performances and sounds and arrangement and drum patterns and all these things. You become too used to it. That's a really hard thing. It's a hard thing to deal with. It's a hard thing to overcome. I think it sort of compromises just being in a creative moment. Sometimes I'm just like, well, I've told artists sometimes it's like, well, I'm not even sure we should re-record that. That feels great. It doesn't sound the way that I think it could sound, but I don't know that we're going to be able to beat the inspiration and the creative moment that was captured there. And sometimes you can do the work, and somebody's willing to be open-minded and get there, and accept a different version of it and embrace it and sort of help make it great, but it becomes something different. It'll never have all the best qualities. It's funny, a lot of times it's like, well, I love the demo except for this. And then it's like, well, okay, we try to fix the except for this, but then you lose all the things that they love because it can't be exactly the same. Can you use some of those elements from the demo in the final record? Well, sure. And sometimes you do that. Sometimes that's the smart thing to do. Just try to have that objectivity and that separation, and leave the demoitis behind. That's also another really difficult thing, because people with their laptop or their writing sessions, they can make really accomplished demos, and it just becomes a very can be a very difficult thing to navigate sometimes. You know, I also think that artists need to be patient with discovering who they are, finding their sound. I think especially a lot of new artists, they want to discover and define their sound, and while that's good, you know, if it's not successful, if your first attempt is not successful, then you know, it's a sort of a travesty, or I think a mistake, to move away from what your initial inspiration was and what you were trying to do just because it wasn't successful, and you sort of switch your sound. You need to be patient with the process of identity and figuring it out. Or chasing something. It doesn't all happen. Typically, it doesn't all happen once that you like hit a home run or you just knock it out of the park the first try. Sometimes it happens. That can be a great thing, but then it's also there's downsides to that. Sometimes you make your first record and then you feel like, oh wow, I really learned about who I am, and I kind of want to switch things up. And because you've had a successful record, if you try and change too much, sometimes you're at risk of losing your audience. And so if it's about being patient and developing a sound over the course of several records, especially when you're starting. Because if your first record is not successful, well, maybe you just need to figure out how to do it a little bit different, a little bit better, or maybe it's the quality of the songs, or you need to work with different creatives, or maybe you made an incredible record that wasn't marketed well, or it just didn't have the proper opportunity. So you need to be patient with trying it again in a different way and building and developing. Or if you're really successful, you need to be patient with yourself and know that you need to take some time away and find a way to truly do something that is like a progression and an extension of that. Or if you really want to flip the script, that you're doing it with as much genuine intention as you did the first record. Creative identity and finding who you are and developing that and changing over time, it really does take time. There's a lot of trial and error. I can't think of one album in the history of music that every song was a hit, or that every song on an album was loved equally by the fans of an artist. I mean, I might love a particular artist and you might love the same exact artist, and we might be both have the same passion for the artist, but I love songs 3, 6, and 7, and you love songs 1, 2, and 8, okay, on an album. We love them with as much passion, but we love different sides of them. So you have to. There's a lot of things to learn and navigate. So I think being patient in finding success or not being successful is really essential, and to know that you're going to change over time, and as you change over time, it's a process of understanding what those changes are and how you can express your truth or what is inspiring to you again over and over. And even the final thing I would say in terms of being patient as an artist and development is that even the most successful artists through time that have had hits, and then they have misses, and then they come back with hits, and they reinvent themselves. It doesn't happen one record to the next. Sometimes it happens, it might take 2 or 3 records before they kind of go through a journey and come back, and over the course of a career you can say, well, okay, wow, they made 20 records, and maybe 4 or 5 of them were real high points, and that they really solidified a new version of themselves, and they really reached a broad audience. They redefined themselves and kind of came back into something. You have to be able to think about that. That's like, if you're going to make 20 records, if you make 20 records, you'd be hard pressed to do it in 20 years. So if you're in it, you need to be in it for the long haul, and just know that, like anything in life, it's a process.